Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Mindset Unlimited. Today, we are talking about identifying your true goals, finding and leading from your truth center. This is such an important topic right now as we navigate the world in spaces of upheaval and recognize that we need to create major shifts, which requires us to let go of our brain and our ego's attachment to what feels safe, what we've learned fictitiously is secure for us, and be able to step into unknown spaces on a solid footing, which is in connection to our truth. And so that we can lead ourselves forward and we can co-lead with others forward into creating a more loving, a more caring, a more supportive way of being with each other. I am thrilled to introduce you to Amy Pons, who is joining me for this conversation. She is a fellow Chicago life coach and podcast host. Her podcast is Women Making Moves, and I was thrilled to be able to be on it recently. We're talking about all things life coaching. If you have not checked that out, there is a link in the show notes, and I would love for you to listen. And her other episodes, the other interviews that she has are just incredible. I am a huge fan of the podcast. That's part of how we connected, is I reached out to her around her interviews. And so she's just fabulous. She is a warrior and a healer who, through empathetic coaching, passion, spiritual guidance, and a little bit of magic and a hint of spice, guides humanity to create the balance we've never seen in this lifetime. What used to feel okay, fine, or even great no longer does. You're being called inward, and it can be jarring or even scary. And it's always worth it to live in a version of you that is your favorite. We talk about that. We talk about the importance of the journey and what you accrue along the way, and how that matters as much, if not even more, than the end goal. How claiming your power begins by releasing control of what's not yours and identifying and claiming what is. Gratitude, embracing duality, curiosity, and other ways to support a mindset shift. And also, when to get a coach and how to choose the right fit. This is such a juicy conversation, and I know you're going to love it. So without further ado, let's get started. Welcome, Amy. I'm so excited to have you on Unlimited.
To be here. Unlimited. What does that even mean? In a good way.
That's one of my questions at the end, actually, is what does that mean to you? So we will definitely talk about that. But speaking of unlimited, one of the things that this podcast is really focused on is taking off our learned limitations. So I like to start off asking you about what is a limit that you took for granted that you have since unlearned.
I kind of joke, like, of course I know what unlimited means. I'm so in tune with spirit, nature, universe. Us being at one with universe and source, there are no limitations. It's to your point, the lived human experience at which places any limits based on our lived experience. So I have like a million limitations. My whole life has been one big limit, meaning in my family in particular, the lived experience was based on fear, scarcity, lack. It's like being beholden to only those things that which make you money, or there wasn't a lot of other conversations. So the limitation or the lived experience based on what my family only knew was doing life, so to speak, one way, which was going to mainstream church every Sunday. And it never really landed for me necessarily. I was like, meh, okay. Something didn't land right with me, that we were looking to like one entity for basically transcription of a text. I don't know. So it just didn't land with me. but that was all that I learned. And then you go to school, you know, get a job, get a paycheck, pay taxes and retire to Florida was kind of like the vibe. So it was like, that's what I mean by one huge limit. And a lot of people will say, oh, you're faulting your parents. The thing about that is duality is a huge thing for me. More than one thing can be true at once, meaning I understand that they only knew limitations. That's the only way that they knew how to do life. And so that was, of course, going to come through with me as growing up. And for the first 40 years, I absolutely did that, quote unquote, did it. I did life. Great. And around 35, which I have this other philosophy with women specifically as we head into a perimenopause, literally our brain chemistry is shifting. So a lot of times, and what happened for me, what I experienced is that I started to remember who I was on the soul plane around 35. And especially when I hit 40, it was like a catapult. I was like, ugh, like fast tracked. It was wild. And everything I knew, trusted, believed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all came unraveled 2 years ago. And I was like, what is this? High octane corporate executive was what I was doing. And I was completely unavailable to anything that I felt inside as a unique, organic, on a soul plane, like who, who were, who I was here to be. And I did feel that to some extent in my day to day because I didn't feel jazzed about creating a global digital payment wallet for a Fortune 200 company. That wasn't my jam, but I could do it because I'm a fiery Aries and I'm gonna crush it no matter what. Um, but what did start to feel good to me was what I now understand to be coaching. I became the women's employee resource group leader and I started coaching hundreds of women. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, but I can't make money as a coach. Like, what does that even mean? I gotta have a job. I gotta have a job. What is that? So what's coming through and explaining all of this is that a limitation that I experienced around my relationship with both, let's say, money and abundance, like holistic abundance, was a limit that I both did not understand my entire life and that's still kind of unfolding.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we're taught that we're just supposed to know. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hearing, and that like the idea that, okay, I did it, it's done. Like seeking all of those, like, oh, here's this rule book. Here's how you're supposed to be. And you just do those things, and then you get the prize at the end. And it's like, there isn't a done point. So one of the unlearnings that I've had is actually being okay with being in process and not having a done point. And what does that look like to not be done? I mean, and like I think about the various chores. There was a cartoon years ago. My dad had it taped to one of our cabinets, and I can't remember which. It might have been like For Better or For Worse or something like that, where the dad was doing the dishes and he left like a couple dishes at the side of the sink, and then he turned the lights off and he turned them back on. And then there was a huge pile of dishes and he goes, I knew it. They multiply in the dark. And I feel that way with dishes, with laundry, with all of those things. And we think of those kind of ongoing things as those are the chores. Those are the things we have to get through. Those are the things that are weights. Those are the things that are like, gosh, if I were living in a perfect life, I wouldn't have to deal with them when I get to this point then.
But is that true?
Right. Well, exactly. Is that true?
I mean, supposedly, I guess. Yeah, it's like feeling beholden to like, okay, once I get there.
Mm-hmm.
But what is there? And okay, sure, one could say that if you made a certain amount of money, you could hire somebody to do everything in your life for you. And what does that living look like? Are you living?
Yeah.
Because for me, like the shift and the unlearning for me is you mentioned chores. It's like I get to do these things because, wow, I have a home, I have clean water. And this might seem trite to some folks or like toxic positivity. Uh, you would be shocked how much gratitude plays a role in what's enough, what is, what your actual goal might be. Is your goal to be a millionaire? When you unpack that, it seems like so many goals today. I'm an elder millennial. So many goals growing up through my time was all about getting as much money as you could get. I'm like, oh, oh,
Yeah, there was never enough.
and there's never, and there will never will be. And how do you actually want to feel when you do become a millionaire? You want to feel happy? Cool. Also, getting to that point, I don't think a lot of people think about what you accrue along the way, whether it be mind, body, spiritual, getting to that point of being a millionaire. And you might have a whole new set of onslaught things that you're like, oh, I didn't want that. Well,
Yeah. If you're singly focused and one thing is the thing that once I get that, then I'll be, then you're missing out on a holistic view of life and all the other pieces that go along with that. Like, I'm not interested in making a ton of money by exploiting people
yeah,
because what does my soul accrue when I do that?
exactly. That's a great point. Part of my role throughout my corporate life was in marketing was getting people to spend more money on their credit card. Ugh, how icky that feels. And like that's when I started to feel I'm like, whoa, I don't know that this was what I came here to do, Earth. This is what I don't know that this is what I came here to do. And so I was making great money by getting people to make or to spend more money. And I think there's nothing wrong with setting any goal in your life. Awesome. The question is, what is the intention in which you're setting that goal? And and in duality, especially if we talk from a soul perspective, nothing's innately good or bad, but it's again the intention behind it is the way we feel satisfied or dissatisfied on the other side of the thing that we did. That's where I always start with all my clients. It's like I purposely ask, I'm like, what are your goals? And it'll be like, do this, do that, do this, do that. I'm like, cool, cool. How do you want to feel on the other side of this? And they're like, I don't know, like accomplished? Cool. Why? And like, you know, as a coach like that, we'll head into a really interesting conversation,
Mm-hmm.
unearthing, excavating things that they didn't even realize.
Yeah, those underlying things that motivate us that are beyond our conscious level, then often they're shoulds. Sometimes they're like real nuggets in there, right? But a lot of times it's shoulds based on stories that we were taught
Yeah.
of what doing something or having something would mean about us, about who we are, about what we can have, who we can be, and all of that. And you mentioned the idea of toxic positivity. And I like to highlight there because I think sometimes it gets confusing of what is actually being positive and what is being toxic. And I think of it like math, right? Like toxic positivity is when you pretend you don't have what you have,
Right.
right? And so to be able to like if you feel a burden from something, well, what about that? Like, that's where you do that reflection, like you were talking about, of like, well, what about that? Like, what would you feel like if you didn't have that? And also the not imposing it on other people. Like, you should, anytime the shoulds involved, like, you should be grateful. Okay, now we have a problem because now you're glossing over the feelings that are actually present. And that can be done to oneself. Like, oh, I should be grateful for all these things. Okay, but if you're not, what's stopping you from feeling grateful? What's in the way of that? Because just telling yourself to feel a way you don't feel isn't going to, that is that toxic positivity. We're pretending we're going to, but gratitude is so powerful, and it is so helpful to actually also get in touch with reality. Like, anything that pulls us away from
Yeah.
what is true for us humanly, as well as that what's possible. I used to get overwhelmed by, my mom would say, like, well, the realm of all possibilities. I'm like, that is too big.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is why I'll talk about like this idea of the learned limitations versus the chosen limitations. The choices that we make that create a container for ourselves, and knowing, okay, what is it that I actually want? How do I want to feel in my life? And how do I move with that in mind? And that's something that comes up around this, this transition from 1 year to another in our calendar system, where we think about the idea of goal setting and resolutions. And people who listen to this podcast know that I'm not into that. Like, we talk about like maybe intention setting and that sort of thing. But even like anything that we're so conditioned to focus on the future all the time. But I think people get confused about like, how do I plan into the future but stay present? And especially in a time like this where we're in such a massive shift with so much uncertainty, people are still carrying the weight of like, within the intensity of COVID,
Yeah.
with the initial intensity of that, like, oh, 2 weeks, wait 2 weeks, wait 2 weeks. And that did something where, like, I'll say, of course you're struggling with any kind of planning, because there's a trauma in that of like, you can't see forward. But within change, there's a period of like, I don't know how to plan because I don't know what's going to happen. And of course, we also know we only have power over ourselves. I'd love to hear your thoughts on like that idea, because as I'm talking, I'm seeing this intersection of like, when you know that you can't control anything outside of you, things are going to impact you. But the only thing that you truly have power over is how you show up and what you do. The intersection with being present and planning ahead.
I think it comes back to when you feel yourself forcing and overriding in any possible degree, meaning I have no idea what the future looks like, but I'm going to plan something, like with gusto, and you become beholden to that idea of you've got to take a moment to consider, do you got to? And where's that coming from? That's such an invitation. And it's really effing uncomfortable because, and like COVID was the best example for especially those who only felt good when they were in full control of every moment of life. So you saw so much mental health deterioration because there was so much lack of control. So for me, it's finding a balance between feel your feels. Like if you are overriding, like if you genuinely, and here's the difference, dropping into your body, feeling into, if you vibe with chakras, energy centers, literally feel into your physical body of what there might be kind of a pinch. And you know when your body, maybe you don't. This is the invitation. Feel your body. Ask your brain to take 5. Feel into your body. What is actually true? And what I'll share on that in terms of planning for the future versus staying present, or not versus, in contrast or with, it gets to be both. So dropping into your body and saying, I don't have capacity at all to set a goal today. Amazing. Feel that. Allow it to feel. Ask your brain then, which is likely the one that's like, set this goal now. Ask your brain to come, like, show your brain where in your physical body that you don't have capacity today, and see if the two can meet. Because a lot of times we'll come up with this internal battle between different energy centers, no matter what you subscribe to. For me, it's chakras. It's like, how do I feel? Can I allow that to be felt? And then set the intention in the future. I want to feel calm and peace, and I want to feel ready to be able to set goals. Cool. That will tell my brain, oh, okay, so she's not overriding me. We get to get there, but for now, I'm going to hang back with the rest of the energy centers and hang out because we don't have capacity. It's allowing your brain to work with you rather than like a push pull, because that's a constant battle. And depending on where you feel it, there could be within your energy centers working against each other inadvertently. And it's not your fault. It's a lot of the conditioning training that we've brought up with. A lot is going to happen with our root chakra, which is our safety, stability, and security. So if you don't, quote unquote, do the thing that might head toward something that keeps you safe, root's going to have some things to say. Feel into it. It all gets to be both. It's not ignoring any part of you. It's like, I want to plan for the future, and I don't have capacity today. The other thing I'll say about that too is a lot of times when we get into planning for the future, we will attach ourselves and become beholden to the how, the what, or the when. Ooh. And my clients hate it when I say this, but secret too. I'll say, how do you want to feel? And they'll say, okay, I want to feel abundant. Great. Now, the how, what, and when is none of your business. And they're like, what? Yeah, it's none of your business. But you've set the intention that you want to feel abundant. Amazing. That's almost like reaching up into the sky with a lighthouse so that the universe, or whomever you subscribe to, God, source, creator, universe, can see your light and send you the energetic matches that will co-create with you to get to that abundance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, not forcing, don't override anything that's trying to come in. Allow everyone to be in the thought pool or the feel pool, and detach from the outcomes. And all of this sounds like gobbledygook to those who are like, how the possible F do I do that? You get a coach.
Yes,
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're not meant to do this alone. That's one of the things that I say is like your inner work. You're the only person who can do that work, and you're not meant to do it alone. So we're not, just like as you're talking, I was thinking about how much we have overemphasized our intellect, placing so like the brain, right? The cognitive ability. We have overemphasized our cognitive ability as the primary, and we have learned to bypass our heart intelligence, our gut intelligence, which also have neurological centers, right? So if you want to get biological about it, there are nerve centers, clusters where those are essentially other brains, but we don't listen to them because our systems can't function if we spend the time to listen. But hey, guess what? Our systems aren't functioning. We're about to see that in a really big way. So now is a great time to slow down and pay attention to those.
Your bodies will sit you down if you don't proactively. And here's something I want to share, and I'm not a doctor, a medical SME on any level, and I also am an energy coach. That energy will be stored, whether we want it to or not, until the point where it has nowhere else to go, and it will sit us down where we don't have a choice. So that's where everyone's like, why do I have to do the work? Yeah, you don't have to do anything. Free will, autonomy. And you could get to a point where your body makes the choice for you. And that's where I feel that we come in, where we're like, if you want to explore it by any degree, that's where, to your point, the ego and the brain are always going to keep us in quote unquote safe and familiar territory. Well, of course, the work of the unknown, brain's going to be like, no, nope. And if you gave yourself a minute to be like, whoa, I haven't pooped in a week. Cool. That's your invitation. Something doesn't feel good, or is something of your body. Like, someone's ringing your doorbell. Someone, meaning your own body, your guides, universe, God, source, creator. Someone's inviting you to explore or to excavate. And you get the choice to ignore that until you can't,
Yeah.
in my experience.
Yeah. And mine as well. Also, because I've seen it with so many clients who come to me after they're starting to feel the breakdown, or have been hospitalized for a breakdown, or are dealing with some sort of chronic illness,
Right.
because they didn't listen to, or because of early childhood trauma, which is also a facet too. So it's not all like you can sit down and do the work, but to recognize that there's more care that's needed, and to create spaces of that. Because just because our society doesn't naturally provide it doesn't mean you don't deserve it.
Oh, you so deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
found that to be like one of the earliest things that I'll work with people is, do you trust yourself? Do you love yourself? Do you think you're worthy? Are you valuable? And do you deserve it? Like, those are the kinds of conversations we even start with. And it's amazing how many people don't even know that they can't full body say like yes to some or all of those. And it's like, woo, okay. Those are the invitations.
Mm-hmm.
Our birthright is to exist on this plane, like literally, which is an automatic deserving of feeling into the favorite version of yourself. A lot of people say best or highest. That suggests there's like one or like better, or I'm like, your favorite.
Mm.
When you give yourself butterflies. Ooh.
Yeah. I like that. I've also struggled with those terminologies, because so much of our words, which are symbols that are rooted in our social understandings, and so words can be really clunky. and and so what we have access to utilizing can activate certain parts of ourselves that aren't, even when we're trying to say something else, like, your best self or your higher self or whatever. It's like it's almost like we miss something. This has been coming up a lot, the idea, Audre Lorde's quote about the master's tools can't dismantle the master's house. And in some ways, our words are like that.
I host a workshop through this organization I'm with, the Human Array, which is called Words or Spells. And it's like thoughts and words or spells. And exactly what I mean by that is, like, before we even know it, there's like a thought that's run through our head. Because here's what I feel is, we all have a truth center within us, in our internal or energetic field. And that truth center, at the same time that that's true, our bodies almost act like a shock absorber to our words and our thoughts. So your body could take on something that's not true, but your truth center is not necessarily accessible to your body in that moment because your thoughts and words are so powerful. So your body takes on, imagine just over, I'll myself an example, over 40 years, my body was a shock absorber for so much that did not align with my truth center. But my body was under the impression that that was all truth. So through my own physical illnesses and chronic things over the past 2 years, hospitalizations, I went through a massive purging, like my physical body did, getting back to that truth center. So that all sounds really heavy. And I don't mean to ever never scare anyone. Again, it's just like take the tiniest degree of what you and I are saying and saying like, okay, what's the tiniest degree that lands with me that I could kind of excavate and explore? And it could be like, how's my heart today? How does my stomach feel? Does my head hurt? Because when something, and this goes back to what we were talking about setting expectations, we're not saying that you can't set goals. Goals are great. But when you set yourself up for either expectations or attaching to any sort of outcome, which is in the how, what, or when, and it doesn't happen, before you know it, you have a thought, which is like, which could be around, I'm not good enough. Ooh, before you know it, your body took that as fact. And oh, shoot, now we're at odds with our truth center. Because is it true that I'm not good enough? No, that's not true. So then there's work to do.
Yeah. Well, and the tricky part is that then our brain creates a story that's rooted in what we're familiar with about why our body is responding the way it's responding. And we think that's what's true instead of actually digging further to understand what's happening within ourselves and our truth center. And that's so often that deeper part of actually looking at, well, almost like what you were saying of what is the thought. People talk about the thought, feeling, action sort of model, right? The cognitive behavioral analysis design, right? But what I have found is that it isn't really, it's like the thought that we don't know, the feeling, and then the thought that we have from the feeling or the belief that activates, and then the more feeling, and then the action that creates patterns in our life. So when we can go further than that of like, what is my body feeling? And I love the modeling that you're doing right now. And I don't even know that you probably just, this is part of how you do this, but the pausing, even within the phrase, how you're really taking that moment to access what you're seeking to convey. And I have heard so many stories come through as I've done work with clients around pausing, of this resistance to pausing because it looks like I'm slow. It looks like I'm this, that, or the other thing, like these stories. And I have a kid whose brain is slower. And I actually, through that work of like understanding slow processing, I'm like, oh, I'm a slow processor. But if we bypass taking that space, that's where we're going to grab the tool that's most available. And it's going to be the one that we were conditioned to use, because that is naturally going to be it's like you put your hand out looking for something and society will just, here, this is the tool you're looking for. And so you will use it. It's the one that feels the most familiar in your arm. And so taking that pause, you receive that tool and you go, no, that's not the tool I'm looking for. Let me find it.
You put it down.
You put it down.
It's not yours.
Yeah.
And that's a really beautiful acknowledgement. And the good news is the more you get in touch with your truth center, and I'll give you an example. I'll give everybody a really easy, tangible example of your truth center coming through. When there's been something that's unfolded in your physical life, people, places, and things, and later on you might feel bad about it. something feels icky, it's likely that something within that interaction did not align with your truth center. That's why you're feeling, some people might call it guilt, or I'm just feeling something doesn't land, something doesn't sit right. That's the invitation. That is an example of what you just said, where you've used or leveraged something from your lived experience that does not align with your truth center. That's where you start to unfold what is and is not your truth center. And what's beautiful is when you start to discern, and you said this earlier too, like it's either a feeling thought or a thought feeling, to understand which one is the root. When you start to figure out which is the discernment and which is actually your truth and which one is your conditioning, it's still important not to judge that conditioning because that's beautifully part of you as well. It's saying, hey, welcome. And when you allow yourself to step outside of the copy paste, like if I sit here and process for a minute, somebody's going to judge me. Cool. That's not mine. That's theirs. When you give yourself that moment to discern, that pause, then you're like, okay, I honor that this is the way that I have been conditioned. And I would love to explore what would be a response from my truth center. Then again, like I picture head and heart, but like also I have sacral authority. So I picture my sacral energy and my brain like walking together. Um, the more you can have that discernment and help them both to feel seen and heard, mm, that's where, that's like on any degree, that's if someone needs a how, that's a step toward the how, at least in my practice.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really important. I'm glad that you brought that forward because that is something that I often see is that people that I work with have done enough personal development through our traditional modes of development that they know how to beat themselves up with it.
Oh, right.
Right? And that's what happens. Oh, I shouldn't be shooting on myself. Ah,
I'm like, no, let's let the should in.
yeah, just give it some room. Let it be heard in its fullness so that you can care for that part of yourself that needed that felt like it needed that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had someone important in my life say to me at one point that they wished that they could have been the person in that role that they thought that I wanted them to be. And I was like, whoa, that is a loaded thing. And I understood the message behind it of like, there was a certain amount of regret that they weren't able to show up the way that they wanted to show up. But there's a lot of like, I think that you think that should of this and that and the other thing. And it was like, okay, well, I can hold space for the feeling of that and also recognize that it wasn't perfect, whatever that means. It wasn't what if I as that person that I was a long time ago had been able to say this is what I want for somebody in my life in that role to be like, I probably would have said a number of things that that person was not.
Yeah.
And all of those human pieces, all of those things that weren't what I would have said I wanted are part of how we are able to connect the way we are now.
Mhm.
And part of who I am now and why I can show up with people the way I can now. It's all part of my story and my journey and my work. It's given me an awareness and access and a journey that allows me to be who I am now. And so I can hold space for all of that and all of them. That doesn't mean that, were they still to be the same person that they were at that time, I wouldn't set boundaries differently as an adult person. And so, yes, both and in that.
Both and always. You get to feel, and this is what a lot of people in my experience like struggle with, is that on the soul plane, again, there's no good, bad, right, wrong. Everything just is. And so, for instance, as an intuitive, I have glimmers, peeks behind the curtain of things that might be transpiring. Just because I know and feel what's unfolding doesn't mean sometimes that doesn't hurt in my human experience. So I think there's an assumption. It's like if you're an intuitive or in tune with spirit and coach, like you know why everything's happening. You understand the why. It doesn't make it any easier sometimes on a human experience level. Um, some days I just allow myself. Oh my gosh, I just had one Saturday. I allowed myself to be so mad all day long. Did it serve me? Maybe, maybe not. But I allowed it in because I'm like, okay. And I've had this energy for probably like 2 weeks now. It's like, what? I'm going through an upgrade. Like I get to experience an upgrade. So I feel it. I get all ragey and I'm like, okay, all right. So much of it is just allowing and never forcing. And some people are like, well, I just gotta go to work. When there's things as humans, as responsible adults, that we gotta just do. Again, it's finding on any degree that you allow yourself to feel it all. Maybe you get your favorite drink on the way into work or whatever it is. Find a way to find space and softness for that, whatever's coming in.
Yeah.
And to your point, don't bypass it.
Yeah.
Turn it all the way up if you can.
Absolutely. Really feeling your feelings because there's so much information in there, and it can be information that you need to do something different, that you're missing out of alignment with your truth. And it doesn't necessarily mean do something right now. Like sometimes I don't know
Oh,
what it is, right? Like sometimes I can just know that something is not fitting. Something feels off. And I don't get to know what it is yet. Or I do, but I don't have the choices available to me yet. And so, what is the choice that I can make that honors that space, that moves me in a direction toward the choices that I'm seeking to make? That was a big aha for me of like, oh, maybe it's not all about like the choices. Maybe they're not choices I can make right now because of my human experience, because of what's happening in my life and the constraints that I have and the other choices that I've made. But when I can recognize that it's something that I'm called to, something that I desire, then I can make the next choice towards that, in that direction, honoring whatever it is that's calling me in that direction, even if it's not the thing that I would choose right now because of other things that are important to me, even.
and that's why having a coach is so cool, is to be able to mirror back, of course, like what you're walking through. And we are trained to extract those nuggets, even if you don't realize it's a nugget. It's like, here's what I'm hearing. It's so cool to have that kind of mirror. And coaching as a profession has just been exquisitely interesting to me because when I left corporate, in the corporate world, coaching existed on, if you're not familiar, you got a company sponsored coach once you got to a certain level within the organization. Otherwise, you don't get that. And so that's all that it occurred to me, that it was only about, I actually didn't even know what they were coached about. It was like, what are they getting coaching on? I don't, it doesn't make sense to me. And then I get it now. And I don't know if those executives, because they were in their own path, the folks that are coaches and that are the ones helping you step through that next best feeling and action. For me, I call it like a soul aligned action or a truth centered action. That's the really cool stuff that I feel the collective is feeling so strongly right now. And they're like, how the hell do I actually start? Start following people that something about content that lands with you, start following them, set up time with them, build a rapport. The number one success criteria with a coach is making sure you have that two-way rapport.
Yeah, that is absolutely, I very much encourage. And I think sometimes people resist reaching out if they don't know. And I think that's the perfect time to reach out. Because if you're talking to somebody who is really doing that work, their goal and the focus of that conversation is going to be on helping you assess if they're the person to help you do whatever it is or be wherever you are, whatever that looks like, whatever reason you're reaching out. And you actually don't have to have the right questions. Like, you don't have to be like, okay, I'm interviewing you. It doesn't have to be. You can just be like, I just wanted to talk. And that's actually okay. Like,
That's
I just felt like I needed to get on a call with you. Don't
amazing.
worry about wasting anybody's time. I mean, we have a calendar for a reason. Not wasting our time.
Well, it's
That's part of our work.
I actually encourage, I'm like, if you feel like you're like, something's got to give or something's off, and I have no idea what it is, cool. That's the best time to start chatting
Mm-hmm.
and,
Yeah.
and be mindful of those that are wanting to expedite or have the process be fast.
Mm-hmm.
The folks that may not be the best fit. So trust yourself. This goes back to what's your gut feeling. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. That's so, so true. So, thank you for this conversation. This has been a lot of fun. I like to wrap up as we started. We talked about like what does it mean to be unlimited? And one of the reasons I put this at the end is because sometimes what we talk about, because I don't script our conversations and it's, I don't have set questions. It really is more of a conversation than an interview. Sometimes the energy in the conversation helps unlock like what are the words that are vibrating with that energy. So, to that, what does it mean to you to be unlimited?
to have unwavering faith and allowance for my runway of life to be extended all the time, to have a regulated central nervous system, to trust in the process, to be okay with the unknown, to set intentions, and knowing when I set the intentions toward my energetic matches, I shine my light so that others can find me and the universe can give me kind of like a high five energetic match to send it back to me.
Awesome. And when you want to tap into that unlimited feeling, what song do you listen to?
Mm. This is me, Kiala Settle from The Greatest Showman.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, that'll be on my unlimited playlist. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining me today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. It is always a pleasure and an honor to have you join me. And I invite you to be part of the conversation. Leave a note under the episode leave a comment on the blog post for this episode on my website, send me a text, send me an email. I really, truly love to hear from you. So whatever way feels most accessible for you, let me know what came up for you in listening to this episode. Is there a nugget that you took away from it, or did it bring questions forward that you would like to have answered in a future episode? I want to hear from you, so please don't hesitate to reach out. And of course, if you are looking for coaching support, my information and a link to schedule a free exploration session is in the show notes, along with Amy's. So please reach out. We are not meant to do any of this alone. I'm here for you. I'm sending you so much love, and I will talk to you all next time.